Fighting in Kostiantynivka has intensified, and right now the town is under direct attack. What's keeping the enemy from taking it is the work of Ukrainian UAV pilots. Their strike and reconnaissance missions are the main thing standing between Russian forces and full control of the town. Russian troops have pushed to the outskirts and are trying to dig in there, and they're also pushing into the town itself, though they're taking heavy losses doing it. North and east of town, near Illinivka and Novodmytrivka, Russian forces are trying to establish a foothold that would let them cut off movement into Kostiantynivka entirely and effectively control the whole area. Meanwhile, small infiltration attempts into the town continue, and the Russians keep losing men in the process. None of this means the situation is simple or fully under control. But Kostiantynivka is still held by Ukrainian defense forces. And about those videos you might see online of soldiers waving flags in the town, that's a propaganda tactic, nothing more. Any infantryman who lives long enough to get filmed like that ends up dead or captured shortly after. There's also a so-called ceasefire proposal on the table from the Russian Ministry of Defense, and Ukrainian intelligence group DeepState isn't buying it. They're calling it a trap. Their reasoning, it's precisely the drone strikes and reconnaissance work that are keeping the enemy from finishing the job in the city, so a pause would hand Russia exactly what it can't currently get by force. Russian infiltration into the town is coming from sheer numbers. Ukraine simply doesn't have enough infantry to plug every gap, and it's the drones doing the heavy lifting to slow that down. Deep State's point is blunt. Russia wants this ceasefire because its soldiers are dying in the city and calling on Ukraine to stop shelling rings hollow when Russian KAB bombs and drones are the ones leveling it. Ukrainian drone operators are steadily thinning out the ranks of Russian UAV crews on the front line. Fighters from the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment caught two Russian drone operator teams at exactly the wrong moment, right as they were rotating out of position. The Russians tried to swap personnel quietly, but Ukrainian forces spotted the movement in time and struck both locations. The rotation attempt didn't just fail, it cost them two operator teams.
Як знаєш, на камеру емоції.
Слава Україні!
Слава Україні! В складі нашого екіпажу є троє людей, безпосередньо я, Кух, пілот, Борсук, спотер і також спотер. Особливість важких бомберів в тому, що ми можемо підіймати
Drone operators from the Volia Company of the 3rd Motorized Infantry Battalion spotted small groups of Russian infantry moving in the open near Vovchansk and hit them. 12 occupiers were killed in the strike. What stands out in the footage released afterward isn't just the number of casualties, it's the behavior captured on camera. Some of the Russian soldiers didn't even try to run or take cover once the drones were overhead. They seemed to treat getting hit as a foregone conclusion, moving with a kind of resignation rather than urgency. New footage from the Madyar's Birds unit shows their operators spotting a Russian infantry group moving along the front and engaging them with the same kind of precision. A kamikaze drone strike killed one assault trooper outright, a direct hit that ended the engagement for him immediately. A second strike, aimed at another member of the same group, badly wounded him instead, hitting him in the lower body and almost certainly taking him out of the fight, even if he survived the injury. Meanwhile, President Trump told reporters in the Oval Office that he believes Vladimir Putin is feeling the pressure and that both Moscow and Kyiv want the war to end. Asked about it directly, Trump said Putin wants to end it, so does Ukraine, and that negotiations are underway to see if that's possible. He added that the war may be closer to ending than most people think, calling the overall situation terrible, this after Russia's strike on Kyiv on the night of July 6th. According to the Kyiv Independent, citing senior Ukrainian officials, Kyiv sees an opening right now to pressure Putin into direct talks with Zelensky, leaning on Russia's internal problems, including a gasoline shortage, while trying to lock in more American air defense support. Sources describe Ukraine's missile defense situation as critical, which is why the shortage of Patriot interceptors is expected to top the agenda when Zelensky meets with Trump. One source put it simply: the goal of meeting in Ankara is to nail down the air defense picture and figure out where things go from here. On the Oleksandrivka front, Russian troops are shifting from offense to defense, building fortifications at the positions they've already managed to take rather than pushing forward. That's a notable change in posture, and it's not happening by choice. Southern Defense Forces spokesperson Vladislav Voloshin explained that Ukrainian pressure is forcing the enemy to fall back on engineering structures already in the area, some built by Russia during earlier phases of occupation, some originally constructed by Ukrainian forces before the area changed hands because Russian units can no longer sustain the pace of their offensive operations in this sector. He noted that this shift is most visible in Oleksandrivka itself, where Ukrainian forces have had real, measurable success pushing back against Russian attempts to advance. Over the past day alone, the General Staff recorded 5 separate Russian attacks in that sector, spread across the areas of Oleksandrivka, Sikneve, Ternove, and Illinivka, according to the report, unsuccessful in achieving any territorial gain.
демон, нахуярил! Надо думать. Не скупщимся.
The unmanned systems forces are continuing to grind down Russia's logistics along the land route into occupied Crimea, and the scale of that effort has been significant. That corridor is the main artery keeping Russian troops on the peninsula supplied fuel, ammunition, weapons, equipment, virtually everything the occupying force needs moves through there, because there's no realistic alternative route that isn't even more exposed. Which means every fuel tanker and every heavy transport vehicle on that road is, functionally, a legitimate military target. Not incidental damage, but a direct hit against the ability of Russian forces in Crimea and southern Ukraine to keep operating at all. Over the past week alone, operators from the unmanned systems forces struck more than 360 fuel tankers and transport vehicles along that corridor. That's not a single dramatic strike, that's sustained, methodical pressure applied day after day, vehicle after vehicle. And it's the kind of campaign that doesn't produce headlines the way a single missile strike does, but adds up to a serious strain on Russian logistics over time.
Ебать, он уебал только что.
И вон лежит еще одна. Ой, как тепло оттуда.
New footage shows just how tightly Ukraine's air and ground drone systems are working together now. During an evacuation, an unmanned ground vehicle carrying a wounded soldier was hit by a Russian FPV drone. The enemy then sent a second drone in to finish the job on the wounded man himself. But a Ukrainian FPV pilot got there first, pulling off a fast intercept in midair and destroying the incoming drone before it could strike. A soldier who left his unit without authorization after 6 years of service has returned to fight with the Kartia Brigade. Roman had served since 2019. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, he'd fought as infantry across multiple fronts, from the Serebryansky forest to the Kursk offensive, and racked up a long list of confirmed kills plus a destroyed tank. On March 25, 2025, after a falling out with his commander, he crossed the border into Romania and went AWOL. He'd planned to make his way to Poland to see his brother. But within weeks, he regretted the decision. On January 17th, a friend suggested he come back and join Kartia instead. Roman crossed back over the Tisa River and made it work. He joined an anti-aircraft missile and artillery division as a Mavic UAV operator, now part of Kartia's air defense unit, carrying the call sign Tisa. The brigade credited Ukraine's State Border Guard Service for helping get him back. Paratroopers from the 7th Rapid Reaction Corps have started using their new Firepoint kamikaze strike systems against Russian logistics near Pokrovsk, the first unit in the air assault forces to field them. They've already carried out several strikes on key targets in the enemy's rear. One of the first hits landed in the Lazerny district in southern Pokrovsk, destroying forward depots holding drones, fuel, and ammunition. Firepoint operators also struck targets near Novodmytrivka, about 25 kilometers east of Pokrovsk, taking out a temporary deployment point and a logistics depot. That's the picture across the front line right now. Kostiantynivka holding under pressure, Russian drone crews and infantry taking steady losses to Ukrainian UAV teams, a diplomatic track in Washington that may or may not translate into anything real on the ground, and individual stories, like Romans, that remind you this is still, underneath all the strategy and statistics, a war being fought by people, and we'll keep tracking all of it as it develops.